Okay, get ready, because we are going deep into a fascinating topic today. Um, we're talking about names in India, specifically how surnames can actually, connect people to the caste system.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild. You shared this source with us. Breaking chains with names, navigating casteism through surnames and renaming movements in India. So I'm excited to break it down with you.
Yeah, it's amazing how something as basic as like a last name can actually tell you so much about a person's place in society in India. And this is, even in the 21st century.
Right. And I mean, it was kind of surprising to learn just how deeply embedded the caste system still is today. These names are almost like labels.
Yeah, they really are. Think about it like this. Surnames like Sharma, Gupta, Patel, these aren't just family names. They often signal privilege, opening doors to better education, job opportunities.
While Dalit surnames like Chamar or Bongi,
Sadly, those can lead to immediate prejudice. It's almost like an invisible barrier holding people back just because of their last name.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
And the source mentions that this isn't just like a thing of the past. It's happening now, right?
Absolutely. And what's even more interesting, I think, is how this whole dynamic plays out when upper caste Indians move abroad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the part that really kind of blew my mind. They might face racism in their new countries, but they don't even realize the caste privilege they had back home.
Yeah. It's a total lack of awareness about their own advantages. Like the source gave this great example. Imagine an upper caste professional moving to the US, right? They might complain about racial bias, but completely ignore the struggles that Dalits face back in India because of caste discrimination.
It's a good point. Really highlights the importance of understanding these systemic inequalities and, recognizing your own privilege.
Yeah.
So the source talks about this growing movement to just ditch these caste-linked names altogether.
Yeah. It's a powerful push for change. People are, actively choosing to get rid of their caste-based surnames and take on new ones. It's not just individuals, it's um, organized campaigns, mass movements. It's becoming a big deal.
That's amazing. People taking back their identities. What are some of the benefits of this whole movement?
Well, imagine a society where you aren't judged immediately by your last name. It would be freeing. You'd see less discrimination, more social cohesion, and a lot more empowerment, especially for um, marginalized communities.
I like that vision. It's like leveling the playing field so everyone gets a fair chance based on, their character and their skills, not their ancestors.
Exactly. And the source goes into a bunch of strategies for making that happen. One of the key things is awareness campaigns.
Using education and storytelling to show how much harm these caste-based surnames can do.
Just think about the impact of hearing personal stories, people who have experienced this discrimination firsthand just because of their last name. Those stories can really change how people think.
Right. It's not just about changing minds, though. It's also about changing laws.
Yeah.
The source talks about the need for legislative support, too, right?
Absolutely. We need laws that make it easier to change your name, less red tape. And we need laws that encourage schools and businesses and other institutions to adopt surname neutral policies.
That makes sense. So, schools, universities, even companies
Yeah.
moving away from using surnames in a way that reveals caste,
It would be a huge step towards creating a more fair system.
for sure. But how are people spreading the word about this whole movement?
They're using all sorts of tools, especially technology. Online platforms and social media are really helpful in getting the word out and reaching a wider audience.
It's pretty cool how technology can be used for good like that.
Yeah, for sure. One example that I thought was really interesting is this Namaskar campaign. They use influencers and digital storytelling to encourage people to ditch their caste surnames.
Wow, that's clever. Okay, so say someone decides to change their surname. How do they even begin to pick a new one?
That's a great question. And actually, the source has some really cool and creative ideas.
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, one option is just to use your first name as your last name. Simple, right? Or you could go with a name that has a deep personal meaning to you, something that reflects your values, your passions, anything like that.
That's nice. So instead of getting a name that might have baggage attached to it, you're picking one that really represents who you are.
Exactly. And there are other options too. You could combine parts of different names to make a unique caste-neutral name.
So it's about taking ownership of your identity and creating a name that feels true to you and empowering.
That's it. The source also talks about using neutral endings for names, like names ending in all in or I.
Yeah, those are pretty common across different castes, so they don't automatically, give away your background.
Right. And another idea is to adopt a place name, like the name of your hometown or a region that means something to you.
That's a cool way to honor your roots without having to carry the weight of caste.
Exactly. It's all about finding a good balance between something that's meaningful to you and, breaking free from these invisible chains.
I love this. But I'm also wondering about the psychological and social effects of making such a big decision.
Yeah.
Does the source get into that at all?
Oh, it definitely does. Getting rid of a caste-based surname can be really empowering. It can lead to, much better self-esteem. Think about it. You're not carrying around a label that's associated with stigma anymore.
Yeah. You're free to be yourself.
Yeah.
That must feel pretty liberating.
The source also points out that it often leads to better opportunities. When you don't have that caste identifier anymore, people see you for who you really are, not through, a lens of prejudice.
Which can lead to, better access to education, jobs, even just different social circles.
It can. It can even lead to more social integration. When people aren't always being categorized by their caste, it helps to build a more inclusive society.
Where people connect based on, shared values and interests instead of these inherited social hierarchies. It's like we're finally moving past those old divisions.
Yeah. The source even highlighted this really good example. Imagine like a Dalit student who changes his name from, let's say, Ramesh Chamar to Ramesh Kumar. That one small change can actually have a massive impact on his life, especially in places like schools and universities.
Where there might be biases against the surname Chamar.
Right. It's a good reminder that names can really hold us back or push us forward. And this whole movement is all about moving forward towards a more just future. But of course, there are always challenges.
Yeah, changing things is never easy.
Yeah.
What are some of the hurdles that this renaming movement faces?
One of the biggest is just plain cultural resistance. Tradition and family pride can make it tough for some people to let go of their surnames.
I get that. I mean, for many people, their surname is a connection to their family history, their ancestors.
For sure. The source acknowledges that. It's not always easy to break with tradition, but sometimes progress means questioning those traditions, especially when they negatively impact others.
And even if someone is ready to change their name, there's all the bureaucracy to deal with, right? The legal process can be a real pain.
Oh, yeah. Think paperwork, fees, waiting periods. It's a lot to deal with, and it can be discouraging.
And not to mention, some people might go through a real identity crisis. I mean, it's got to be hard to lose a name that means so much to you personally and to your family.
It's a valid concern. Change can be difficult, and it can take time to adjust to a new identity, even when it's a good change.
And even if you get through all that and successfully change your name, there's still the question of whether society will accept it, Will those deep-seated biases just disappear?
That's a tough one. The source points out that in some places, especially more conservative areas, those biases might stick around even if you have a different name. So it's important to remember that changing your name is just one step in a much bigger fight against casteism.
So it's about changing how people think, not just their names.
Exactly.
Well, this has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground. But I know there's still more to explore. What about solutions? What does the source say about overcoming these challenges and pushing the movement forward?
That's what we'll talk about next.
So how do we tackle these challenges?
Yeah.
What can we do to make India more inclusive? The source kind of lays out this multi-pronged approach, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not a quick fix. We're talking about changing like centuries of ingrained social hierarchy. But the source does have some really good solutions. And one of the first things they talk about is policy reform.
Okay, so let's start there. What kind of policy changes could make a real difference?
Well, I think one of the most important things is making it way easier to legally change your name. Like right now, it's so bureaucratic,
Yeah, I can only imagine all the paperwork and fees and waiting around. That's got to be a huge turnoff for a lot of people.
Exactly. The source suggests like maybe having a streamlined online system, something that cuts through all the red tape and makes the process a lot more accessible. They even suggest maybe offering some financial help, like to cover legal fees and stuff.
That would be huge, taking away that financial barrier.
Yeah.
What about education? That's got to be a big part of changing how people think about this, right?
Whoa, absolutely. Education is key. We need to teach people about the benefits of renaming, not just for themselves, but for society as a whole.
Right. So using schools and colleges, even the media, to really raise awareness. spark conversations about the whole issue of caste-based names.
Exactly. The more people understand, the more likely they are to support change. And the source also talks about how important community support is.
So like creating support networks for people who are going through the process of changing their names.
Yeah, exactly. Think like support groups, mentorship programs, online forums, places where people can connect with each other, share experiences, get advice, find strength in numbers.
That makes sense, creating that sense of community and solidarity so people know they're not alone.
Right. And the source also suggests offering incentives for different institutions to adopt more surname-neutral policies.
So encouraging schools, universities, companies to move away from using surnames in a way that reveals caste.
Right. Like imagine job applications that only ask for your first name, or universities using, I don't know, student ID numbers instead of relying on surnames. It could really level the playing field.
It would definitely send a strong message, like, we value you for who you are, not for what caste you were born into. But what about the big picture? The long-term vision. Does the source talk about what a truly inclusive future would look like?
They do, and some of the ideas are really exciting. One of them is introducing like universal surnames, so names that anyone could use no matter their background.
So like a pool of names that don't have any caste baggage, available for everyone.
Exactly. The source gives examples like Arya, Devi, or Vikram. Can you imagine? Choosing a surname from a collection like that, free from all the weight of your family's history.
Yeah.
It's about shaping your own identity, not inheriting one that might be full of, prejudice.
That is powerful. Everyone gets a fresh start, a chance to define themselves. I like that.
Another cool idea they have is setting up these adopt a name programs.
Adopt a name. What's that?
Well, it's kind of like a personalized name choosing service. So these programs would help people pick out new, meaningful names based on, their preferences, their aspirations, their values.
Oh, cool. So instead of being stuck with a surname that doesn't feel right, they can find one that really resonates with who they are.
Exactly. The source also talks a lot about the importance of cultural integration, blending elements from different cultures into naming practices.
That makes sense. I mean, India has so much diversity, so many different traditions.
Right. And they talk about, incorporating elements from different languages, different regions, really reflecting that incredible tapestry of cultures. So everyone feels represented.
It's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about individual action, changing policies, community support, and focusing on inclusivity.
Sure.
What else can we do to make this vision a reality?
Well, the source also points out how influential media and literature can be in shaping people's perceptions.
Oh, yeah, you mean like how writers, filmmakers, artists can use their platform to promote the whole idea of caste-neutral naming.
Exactly. Imagine if you're watching your favorite TV show or reading a bestseller and the characters just have names that don't reveal their caste. It would be such a subtle but powerful way to shift how people think about this. Normalize the idea of a society where names don't carry that burden.
Right, it's about changing the story, showing people what a more equitable future could look like.
You got it. This movement is so much bigger than just changing names. It's about challenging deep-seated social norms and creating a world where, everyone has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their last name.
Well, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. It's really made me think about how something as simple as a name can have such a profound impact on people's lives and on society as a whole.
It's funny how the things we often take for granted are often the ones with the most power, And this movement is really all about taking back that power, using names as tools for change, not as instruments of oppression.
Absolutely. So we've explored the challenges, the solutions, and this amazing vision for a more inclusive future. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something for them to really chew on.
I think the most important thing to remember is that change really starts with each of us. It starts with questioning the status quo, challenging our own biases, and really embracing the idea of a world where names are a celebration of who we are, not a marker of, where we fall in some kind of social hierarchy.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought-provoking question. If you could choose any surname for yourself, based on your values, your aspirations, anything at all, what would it be? What would that say about the world you want to create?
That's a really good question to end on. I mean, it makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what would I choose? What does that say about, me and the world I want to live in?
It is. It sounds simple, but it gets at the core of what we're talking about here. You're forced to examine your own values and what you believe about, identity and equality and all that.
It's almost like, reimagining yourself. breaking free from how society tries to define you. Yeah, and I think that's what makes this whole renaming movement so powerful. It's about taking control and saying, hey, my name isn't my destiny. I get to decide who I am.
It's like, yeah, shedding those old labels and writing your own story.
Exactly. And when enough people start doing that, questioning those assumptions, that's when things really start to change.
This whole deep dive has been a real journey. I mean, we started by looking at how deeply the caste system is rooted in Indian society. How, these surnames are like these markers of where you stand socially.
And we talked about how those labels can lead to real harm, like actual discrimination. People being denied opportunities simply because of their last name.
But then we found this amazing movement pushing for change. All these people deciding to break free.
People reclaiming their identities, picking names that represent what they believe in, their dreams for the future, and a world that's more fair and equal for everyone.
We also talked about like practical things we can do to help this movement. Like, changing policies, education, building communities, and using tech to spread the word.
Yeah, it's about creating a world where everyone's recognized and valued, where everyone has a chance to succeed no matter what their last name is.
That's a great vision.
Yeah.
And it gives me hope. It shows that even something as entrenched as the caste system can be challenged.
It can. And it starts with that simple question. If you could choose any name, what would it be?
So, yeah, ask yourself that question. Think about it. Really let it sink in. And who knows, maybe it'll spark something in you, a change, a movement, something that helps build a more just and equal world for everyone.